How do you win the Skool Games? I created 10 interactive charts and some summary tables to show you what communities are doing to win the Skool Games in 2025. The Skool Games started in February 2024 as a competition to reward the 10 communities that generated the highest monthly recurring revenue, MRR for short. This is already an impressive chart because the 10 winners of each month were excluded from competing, and as you can see, they often generated above $20,000 or even $50,000 of revenue, and it would only count the new revenue each community generated with new paying members. Until September, the 10 winning groups were able to go to Las Vegas and spend a day with Sam Ovens and Alex Hormozy as a one-day masterclass to share their experience and learn new strategies. And then September happened and the Tesla Cybertruck was added as a prize for the number one community until the end of the year competitions. And as you can see, the action intensified quite a bit. And then in October, previous winners were able to compete again, and it got even more heated, with Max Persson being able to generate almost $250,000 for that month. And then until December, the competition for first place remained really strong, but the rest of the field declined a bit. In the description below, you will find the link to this presentation. As I said, it's an interactive chart, so you are able to select a certain rank, like the 10th place, and find out what it took to win in 2024 and what massive MRRs the first places were able to hone in last year, and to even make it into the leaderboard, the top 20. Skool saw a really strong development last year, where they also did very strong advertisement for the new platform. And here you have a summary table of the 2024 competitions. You see that some owners or communities participated 5 times but were not able to win, and I give you their top MRR and the average MRR and the best place and the winning month in case they did it. For example, Keytron Ranking with the $1 billion circle participated 4 times, then won in September and in October, where previous winners could compete again with a top MRR of $168,000. Here you can sort by numbers of winning. There were only 4 owners that won again in October and in the previous month: Max Persson, Logan Sandel, Anthony Sirius, and Keytron Ranking. But feel free to sort by top MRR and then click through the table to find all the communities that made it into the top 20 throughout 2024. But then a big change happened as Sam Ovens noticed a negative trend where the Skool Games led a bit too much to a pump and dump scheme, especially with the Cybertruck incentive, and they made a change to include categories in which the communities were able to compete. And in the next charts we will see how well this paid off. I will link to the video where they discuss in detail why they made these changes and how the price will look for 2025. The most important thing they did was to create 9 categories in which different communities were able to compete against one another, but instead of 10, they limited it to 5 winners. And this became necessary because when I turn the x-axis from logarithm to linear, you notice that the communities in the money and tech category generated so much more MRR than all the others that health, hobby, and sports or music communities were not able to compete. And if we look at the first quarter of 2025, and only show the winners, you can see what the 5th place had to generate as MRR to win the Skool Games in the category, $3,400. And now some communities that could not make it into the top 10 in 2024 were able to win in 2025, which doesn't mean that you should create a community in these quote-unquote easier categories, because even if you don't win the Skool Games but generate $25,000 over 3 months, that's still a great deal. So yes, here you can look at the winners of the second quarter of 2025 and the first quarter, and you can investigate what's the least amount of money you have to make it into the top 5. And that was one of the biggest changes, that now the Skool Games go on for 90 days, a whole quarter, 3 months, and that you have to be aware of your churn rate, try to keep the members in your community happy, that they pay for more than just 1 month to make this much more sustainable in the long run and more fun for everyone involved. I created this summary table to show you repeat winners, so communities or owners that were able to win in 2024 and now still compete strongly in 2025, winning the first quarter or the second quarter now in their own category. In 2024 there were no categories, so these are the repeat winners. Then we have some finally winners, I call them, people or communities that were not able to win in 2024 even though they competed multiple times, sometimes 4 times, and now they are are able to win in relationships. And Nick Sarayev with the Maker School community in 2024 competed 4 times without making it into the top 10. And in the first quarter of 2025, he only came in 8th place, still not winning, but in the second quarter, he became the most successful community currently on Skool. And there are some that are still trying. 16th place in 2024 for Braden Shaw, 9th place now in the first quarter. As you become a bigger community, of course, it's also harder to generate more revenue, and we will analyze that later in more detail. Here you have a summary table of these new categories with their top 20 communities and quarter 1 and quarter 2 averages and minimum and maximum values to give you an impression of how competitive it is in these categories. Money and tech generate on average very high monthly recurring revenues for the top 20 communities. Self-improvement and health and hobbies is much lower. And then here in the music, relationship and sports categories, I made this table also based only on the winners, so this is now the minimum, median, average and maximum of the top 5 in each category, giving you a taste of what you need at least to generate over a time frame of 90 days in monthly recurring revenue to win in 2025. So definitely not an easy task. And this is a raw data table over the final leaderboard of these first and second quarters. The first competition ended March 2029. The second quarter ended in June 2029. And here I show you the top 20 communities of the hobby category. And then you can click through music and money and all the other categories. And you see that the top 5 are winners and then the rest is runners up. You see what MRR they generated in the first quarter, what their lifetime MRR is, and how it looked the last 7 days. Some had some churn. Some really stepped up their game to make 9K over the last week, finishing strong. And I have that data over 18 pages up to the 20th place in the relationship category. You would be able to find this kind of data in the Skoolers community on skool.com with the different categories and also data looking back until the first quarter of 2025 and the final results. But I thought it would be nice to have just in one summary table. I created this chart to see if there was some changes from the first to the second quarter throughout these different categories. You can still see that the money category has much higher MRRs than music or hobbies. And here this is interactive. You can select one category only and then see the names of the owners that won and their actual MRR. And for most categories, in order to win, the value decreased slightly. That happened in relationships, 3.3 versus 3.5, self-improvement, 7.6 versus 8.7. But for hobbies, it went up 9,500 for the Hamilton dog training. In quarter 1, 7.6 thousand was enough to make it into the top 5. And for health, it also went up. Overall, it remained quite stable for the first half of the year. But then also the winners are not excluded. So Elite Achievers, first quarter of 2025, they added $10,000 new MRR and they were allowed to compete again in the second quarter where they were able to add another 14,000. Next, I wanted to investigate the relationship between the members of these communities and the price they ask for to join them. Both axes are log 10 transformed to add a bit more resolution, both on the member side. As you can see, some communities have 6,000 members, AI filmmaking, but you only need $5 per month to join. Some won 417 and then have fewer members. And it's also something that they capped in 2025. Only $100 were allowed to count into the MRR for the Skool Games. Of course, if you took more and earned more, that's yours to keep, but it wouldn't help you with the competition. And when we filter for winners only, we see that most of them stayed below or right at this $100 price point. As I said, this is interactive, so you can filter for tech and money if you're interested, and then look at these communities to see how many members they have on average. Maybe only focus on the winners to see what price points they ask for. And then you see that hobbies and relationships sometimes have similar or even higher numbers of members, but they ask usually for lower prices to join them. Feel free to explore these kind of scatter plots. I also included the status, runner up or winner, number of members, the owner and the price point. However, to give you an even better overview, I looked into the new members that these communities added in the second quarter of 2025 based on the MRR they generated divided by the monthly prices these communities ask for. So if your new MRR in Q2 was $1980 and you ask for $99 per month to join, that means you added 20 new members to generate this MRR. And this helps you to see how many members do you have to add to win the Skool Games. When we filter for the money category, you start to see certain trends where these communities start to look like they belong to a line. And this line comes from the relationship that if your prices decrease in order to make it into the top 20, your number of new members have to go up. So $50 price for 362 new members, that's $18,000. And communities in the money space that made it into the top 20 have roughly similar MRRs, $27,000 here, $23,000, $28,000, $22,000. So higher prices need fewer new members, which means that this is actually a mistake because only $100 were counted. So they added actually 296 members and not only 71, which means that their real MRR was a lot higher because 3/4 of the price don't go into the Skool Games MRR. So congratulations, Andrea Vega and the Formula 100K. And then there are some models that only asked for $5 but were able to add 4,000 new members and produce $20,000 per month. And these trends, they hold through in these different categories. In self-improvement, usually you make $3,000 and above, $4,000 here by either asking for $100 and then you only need 68 members, or you go down to $10 and then you need 350 members to make it into the top 20. If you only filter for winners, then you see that Hamza Ahmed made $52,000 by adding over 1,400 new members in Q2. So yeah, feel free to explore this to get an impression of how many new members you would need for this monthly price point you have for your community. I actually do have the daily data of the 9 different categories and the top 20 communities, and one rationale behind changing the Skool Games was to focus on a more sustainable growth and not pump and dump schemes. And here are just a few communities of the first quarter from January till end of March. And you can see that some communities were able to steadily increase their MRR until the very end, whereas others increased quite steeply, improved a little bit throughout the middle of the first quarter, but then had too much churn and fell out of the competition, not making it into the top 20 anymore. So that's something you have to figure out a way to add more members steadily, or at least keep the ones that joined. Some communities grew quite quickly from 40 to 80,000 within a week, then even overshooting a little bit to 115, still winning of course in the end, but with a slightly lower MRR than in the middle of the competition. I also included some examples for the second quarter throughout April, May till the end of June. We can highlight a few communities that were able to grow continually, some with some impressive jumps, but then still continual growth, especially for Maker School to become the most successful community, at least money-wise, at Skool.com. And then there were some communities, 45, that made it into the top 20 both in the first quarter and the second quarter of 2025, often with a similar performance. So Casey Sanders of Headman Nation in the relationships category won both times with 15,900 new MRR added in Q1 and then almost 14,000 in the second quarter. If you are above the line, then you added much more revenue in the second quarter, like here 23,000 compared to 10,000. Sadly not winning in the tech category. That's what I call runner. Also here, relationship twice in the top 20 but not winning. The diamond shape is for communities that won in the first quarter but then are way below the line because the second quarter wasn't as profitable. And Hamza Ahmed, Library of Adonis, did not win in the first quarter with $3,000 but then 52,000 in the self-improvement category made him a clear winner. Nate Herc in the tech category winning both quarters with impressive new MRRs. Miles Hamilton, the dog training communities in the hobby category. Here you can also filter again for certain categories, and many communities remain close to the line, being able to generate constant new MMRs through the first and second quarter of 2025. And that's somewhat of an encouragement that even if your first quarter only adds $2,800 of new members, if you improve your community and get more members, then in the second quarter you can become a winner in the sports category with $11,000. Just as a reminder, reminder, Nick Sarath did not win a single competition in 2024, but kept at it and now won the second quarter of 2025. And he just made a big post in the Schoolers community explaining his process and how he managed to run this community all by himself. The shared presentation will also contain this table of the 45 communities that made it into the top 20 in the first and second quarter of this year, with their rank in Q1 and Q2 and the new MRR they generated. And when you filter by status, you get 6 communities in 4 different categories that managed to win the Skool Games and got the all expenses paid trip to now Los Angeles, I think it is. Then we have winners from Q1 that did not win in Q2 and vice versa. Communities not making it into the top 5 in Q1 but then winning in Q2. And then communities that made it into the top 20 twice but without winning yet. Let's talk about discounts next, because some communities offer an annual subscription with a discount compared to the monthly membership. And of the top 20 communities in these 9 different categories, I was surprised that 57 did not offer a discount. 50 of them offered only the monthly option, and 7 only offered an annual subscription, which then is just the price that it is for the year. And of the ones that do offer a discount, the average was 28%. And the median is 25%. And then you can see that the number of communities that give 30, 40 or even more than 50% discount decreases. You again have the option to filter for certain categories. This is another way to show this data. In gray, categories where the communities offer no discount. Here you can see it's 20 per category, minus a few where the monthly price isn't available currently. And you can choose this if you don't want to give a big discount, so no discount at all or below 20. You will see that this is most common in spirituality and hobbies and music, less common in sports. If you want to be really generous and offer a big discount so that the members stay for a long time, more common in sports, tech and hobbies. But overall there's not a clear pattern where one category is vastly different from the rest, so it doesn't seem to be the most important point when it comes to winning the Skool Games or making it into the top 20. I created this chart to show the annual price versus the monthly price, and the trend line shows this roughly 25% discount. Here's one community that you can subscribe to for $10 a month or $10 per month for the whole year, so no discount. But all other communities that are shown here give a discount, and the more you move down towards the monthly axis, the bigger your discount is. So here $99 to $83, that's 16% discount. If you go lower, 20% discount, 33, 32, and then 40% or even 50%, 57% for the Niha Pro sports community if you subscribe for a whole year. I think the biggest discount of the top 20 was 66% for the Vibe marketeers in the tech category. The lowest price, but still 38% discount, AI Filmmaking by Jamie Heinrich, which currently has 6,000 members. Meet with Data, Kevin Wong, 20% discount. For a more expensive ticket, $200 per month instead of $250 for the relationships category. And you can make it cleaner again by filtering for certain categories and get an idea of what kind of discounts the winning communities offer and what monthly or annual price exists in these different spaces. So have fun with that. Of course, the dots over the trend line offer less than 25% discount. On the line, you're pretty close to it, 24, 28, and below bigger discounts. The last analysis is about the relative MRR gains in percentage versus the lifetime MRR to answer the question whether bigger communities have a harder time adding new MRR. And when you filter for Q1, you can see that many communities have almost 100% newly gained MRR. So the lifetime MRR of $1,531 was almost entirely generated in Q1 of 2025, namely $1,521. Again, almost 100% of the residual Earnest University lifetime MRR was generated in Q1. There are some big communities like Maker School that were already at 88,000 but still managed to add 37%, which is $32,800. And what you can see when you switch to Q2, some dots that made it into the top 20 in both quarters mostly move from the top left to the bottom right. For example, Prax Academy, almost all of the lifetime MRR generated in Q1, 98%, $4,000. And then in Q2, they generated more in absolute terms, now $5,500, but that was only 53% now. And that is a common trend that the higher your lifetime MRR, the harder it is to gain new revenue, at least percentage-wise, to keep up the growth that you have. I did try to model that, where I plotted the percentage gain again versus the lifetime MRR, and you see these decreasing lines with a slope of roughly 40% decrease every 10x revenue, which means if you go from a lifetime MRR of 3,000 to 30,000, 10x, your relative gain on average decreases by 40%, so from 75 to 35%. And this trend was quite stable throughout the different categories. Feel free to let me know in the comments what kind of analysis surprised you the most, you found most interesting, or what analysis you think was missing. I encourage you to visit Skool, join communities, or even create one yourself. There are many free communities you can join, and even opening one now only costs $9 per month. And see you at the next video. Bye bye.